Hi, everyone. Welcome back. In today's segment, we're talking about what happens when the roles in a family begin to shift. When you move from being cared for to becoming the caregiver, when duty, love, culture, and survival all intertwine. And in many immigrant families, especially eldest daughters, are often entrusted with the emotional labor, caregiving responsibilities, and holding the family together since childhood, sometimes at the cost of their own needs, identity, and joy. And when illness, aging, or loss enters the picture, those roles can intensify in ways that are both deeply meaningful and incredibly heavy. This conversation invites us to unpack those layers the layers of grief, cultural expectations, and the motivation that can exist around caregiving, especially when a parent is facing something as life altering and painful as cancer. I'm joined today by Johanny Reyes, a licensed therapist and Afro-Latina entrepreneur from the Dominican Republic. Johanny brings both her cultural expertise and her lived experience into her work, supporting clients through grief, trauma, anxiety, depression, and major life transitions. As the founder of her practice, she is deeply committed to creating inclusive, culturally responsive spaces where Black, Brown, and Latina communities can heal, grow, and thrive. She's especially passionate about increasing access to mental health resources for underdeserved communities, including Spanish speaking and undocumented populations. In today's conversation, Johanny shares her insights on what it means to be the eldest daughter, how caregiving expectation takes shape in immigrant families, and the emotional complexity of supporting a parent through illness while managing other identities that she carries and her clients as well. We also talk about healing, what it looks like for you to take care of yourself while you're caring for others, and how to navigate feelings like resentment, grief, and exhaustion with compassion. So, with that, let's go to Miami to welcome Johanny. And here we are in Miami with Johanny.
Thank you for having me, Ellie.
Muchísimas gracias. I was here actually last June, and that's where I met you in person, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we did a whole networking event out here for the local Latinx therapists.
That was fun.
It was fun. It was a good time. But now we're here to talk about what it's like to be a caregiver because I think there's so many of us that have this experience in the Latinx community with immigrant parents as children of immigrants. And we don't talk about it as often as I think we need to. And so today's conversation will be based off of your story and also just your position as a therapist, like helping us understand the mental health aspect of things.
Yes, definitely. It's a topic that we don't speak enough about, and it's so common that once you say, "Oh, the how caregivers and adult children and parentification, how all these things come into play, especially in the Latin community." I feel that it's not talked about enough. So yeah, thank you for.
Yeah, no, thank you for suggesting the topic. Pero, with that, we'll start with the first question for you. And that's for many adult children, there is a moment where our roles do begin to shift and we go from being cared for to being the caregiver. When did you first realize that that was happening for you in your world?
And I first noticed it when my maternal grandfather became ill, and he was older, he was elderly, and I noticed that my mom and her siblings automatically just jumped in and started to take care of him, and even to the point that they were making decisions for him, whether there were financial health decisions. And I started to me I noticed that it was just the norm. It's like, okay, what else is there to do? It was expected. So that was the first time I noticed, okay, this is a thing. Even though you hear about it when lived experiences, when I actually live, I said, wait a minute, like this is what we do. And not only what's expected, but it's what we do, really.
Okay. And around how old were you?
Oh my God, I was in college. So I was in my 20s, early 20s.
And everybody was here or this one?
Yes, everyone was here in Miami. There were family members living in Florida away from Miami, but even though they were far, we could still see the involvement.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Okay, so you were balancing identity as a college student and then as a family member,
Yes.
witnessing your loved ones care for your grandfather.
Yes, and that around that time, that's when I had moved out. Not, it wasn't that long since I moved out
Okay.
for college. So also I was in it, but then again, though I was distant from it because I was in school full time and working full time. So I was kind of like in and out.
And you weren't a parent then.
No, I was not.
Okay, so then later on, your identities and roles and responsibilities began to grow. When did you then become a caregiver for your mother?
I became a caregiver for my mother not long ago because my mom was diagnosed with cancer June of last year, 2025. So that's when, my roles just shifted. Not only me taking care of my mom, but also, having my sister support as well. So I'll say June of last year. So it's been about 8, 9 months or so. So that's when, everything started to change.
For your family, is this a shared role or are you primary helper?
I would say it's a share role. At the end of the day, I'm the one who it's like the main go-to. I feel that my mom, before she makes any decision, it's like she tells me. It's not like she's asking me for permission, but
Runs
she
it by you.
you gotta make sure you run this by Johanny. Or, if it comes to talking to the doctor, I'm the main one. If we need to, make a phone call, medication, anything, I'm the main one who's expected to, do the research on the medication or speak up or make phone calls, things like that. So I do have my sister's support, but I feel, and we know that at the end of the day, um,
You're the oldest.
I'm the oldest.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
So now I'm asking you as a therapist, among the clients that you see that are caregivers, what have you noticed to be the common caregiver expectations and roles in Latinx families?
I see it that it's kind of like the same as, when I look at my life and my responsibilities, and to me it's an honor to be able to do that and show for my mom. They tend to also do the same. The main caretakers, they make responsibility, the emotional support, even financial support, financial decisions, or even looking into their assets. That's something that I found myself doing, making sure, okay, what do their assets look like? What kind of decisions? What kind of paperwork? What do we need to do to make sure everything is ready? When the day comes, or if things get worse. So I find my clients doing the same thing, or even shifting their work calendars, or their responsibilities with their families, as to if they have a husband, kids, partners, that they kind of like the caregiver role takes priority.
Yeah.
It takes, that's number one, and then everything else comes after. So I've seen that with many of my Latin clients, especially women.
Because there's the labor aspect, yes, right, which is all of what you mentioned, and then there's the mental health aspect, and that's kind of the increase of anxiety, even depression, but you're on survival mode, so it's not like you could really focus on your depression or feel it thoroughly, because you still have to wake up for your family, the person you're caregiving for, and if you have children, then your children, your partner, your pets, yes, everybody that is dependent on you, that is living and breathing. If you have fish, them as well, literally your plantitas. And I don't say this jokingly, like this is real. Like we just have to wake up and keep going. That's probably even for some of us like very ableist, because I know that with depression, some of us like just cannot, because we hit burnout, right? And when it comes to caregiving, that can happen too. And with burnout, there's some people that experience compassion fatigue. And that's when maybe they're more irritable with the person they're caregiving for, or even those around them at work. I've talked to so many clients that are just like, I never snap back at my coworkers, but I just got so irritated and I couldn't bite my tongue anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there's the irritability that just seeps out in different ways. It's different levels of impatience, and people tend to also stop doing the things that they once enjoyed. So if they were maybe hanging out with their friends once a week, once a month, or going out to, I don't know, a leisure type of club, then yet they likely stop doing that because of the toll that caregiving has taken on.
Yeah, for me, it's more of an anxiety. I have a to-do list, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So I tend to, I'm a therapist. So my life kind of like revolves on a schedule. So when going to therapy, I found that I have, mother anxiety because of me trying to have everything aligned. the other day I had a doctor's appointment myself, and then, I showed up to the appointment, and I showed up a week early. And they were like, your appointment is not today, I guess next Wednesday, at this same time. And, something that for myself, I said, well, this is my appointment. It's not my mom's appointment. So I was like, man, it hit me.
Yeah, so we tend to put ourselves last to prioritize other people. This and that kind of goes with my next question. In a way, we'll see. But in many of our communities, there can be a silence around taboos or other misconceptions, right? Especially around illness, aging, and caregiving. What are some of these misconceptions or unspoken rules you've noticed about caring for an elderly, let's say with cancer?
So I would say the fact that we didn't talk about it. So saying, don't tell everyone, or, let's wait on that. Or even about treatment itself, whether, chemo is gonna be an option, or radiation, or are we going to opt for, more on herbalist or natural treatment, or kind of like keeping it in, within the family. Let's not, let's not talk about it to too many people, or even the person itself, or like our parent itself. Like, okay, let's see how much we share with them.
From what the doctor said?
Yes, even though they're learn oriented, and they're the ones making decisions, that kind of like that, where do we tell them with, especially because, the doctors speak English. The doctor doesn't speak Spanish. So, I'm the main translator as to the doctor said this, then, so also that's, one of the taboos, or kind of like something that I find myself kind of like dealing with.
So it's a misconception that there are going to be Spanish translators available stats for your loved one that is monolingual, anything, Spanish speaker, any other language. And that's something I experienced too when I was in and out of ICU with my mom, or just appointments. I was very surprised. We were going to a hospital at UCLA in Westwood. It's one of the best ones. But yeah, they would call the translators, they just wouldn't have them available. And if I was in the room, right, as a bilingual speaker, they tried to depend on me versus calling the translator. And I think that's another experience. So it is a misconception. I think that they're available. There's a lot of advocacy that goes on between caregivers and the systems involved, and it's a huge learning curve too.
Yes.
It's a misconception to believe that the system is it's made for us and it's easy and available. Information's not available.
Yeah.
We are learning as we're going, especially as first gens. We have to ask so many questions and get through so many different people.
And the pressure too.
Yeah,
That we hopefully I gotta get the right wording, and then doing our research on that. With clients, I notice also, parentification on them, how they become the emotional support system for the parent, the family, or even, when they're younger siblings, that they're taking that on that role as to, caring for the sibling, or, making decisions that, at some point the parents were the ones making.
So for those of you that are new to the term parentification, it refers to when typically a child is given roles that are beyond their developmental capacities, but that role in childhood can still translate over into adulthood, where you are still taking on responsibilities, not necessarily beyond your developmental, stage, but where you are the caregiver for your parent. And it's natural in many instances, like when there are health situations. I know in some families, it could be abusive. There could be trauma connected to that. It could be part of survival states. And in other families, it's not connected to any trauma, or it's not abusive. It's not forced. There's not a forced obligation in something that as children we want to do, we want to take over, but nonetheless, it's, a form of parentification. So I always see this term on a spectrum.
And within the Latin community, I see it as something that's normal.
Yeah.
It's normalized. It's like, okay, what else am I supposed to do?
So thank you so much for bringing up that term, because yes, it's common. And we talked about this in the episode with Viridiana, with the eldest daughters, as well of, growing up with immigrant parents. So if you haven't heard that episode, I recommend looking back to it. Now, going back, I'm curious to know about your, I think, if you will, self care today. Like, what does it look like since there's so many layers to your identities and responsibilities as the eldest daughter? How are you taking care of yourself today with everything going on?
Therapy, mainly. I had to start therapy because I was just, balancing everything, and it has really helped, voicing my needs. Something, when you're going through things like this, you kind of say, they should know, but they don't.
Mm.
So, voicing my needs, lots of patience, and, trying to exercise, stay active, and eating right, and sleeping. Like, sleeping is my thing. Or like, girl, you too. I'm a sleeper. If I don't sleep, I'm like, I need my sleep. You know how people say, beauty says, and no, it's not only beauty. Like, I need sleep.
Yeah.
So I think also, sleep helps me, and it helps me recharge, and to be able to show up for myself and, my family and my clients too. So
Absolutely.
and actually working with my clients, it's a plus for me. It's something that also helps me, and it's something that I love. So
That's beautiful. That, yeah, there's that capacity that you have to continue to share that space, right, of healing others, but also there's that reciprocation you're also receiving because you love the work that you're doing.
yes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I'm also curious, like in the family sense, like what are some joys that you have in that realm?
Spending time with my family. We love to travel.
You do.
So now, due to the circumstances, we can't travel to Europe right now, but we'll take, a weekend trip. Traveling is something that I love. I love the beach, and here in South Florida, it's within close distance. I would say. So that's something that I love doing as well, going to the beach.
Okay. So you're trying to hold on to all of
Yes.
these activities and joys in your world.
Yes, and spending time with the girls. That's another thing, like brunch.
Like your friends?
That's my other specialty, brunch. And eating. I love to eat.
No, pues aquí no, ¿verdad?
Right?
Sorry. Okay.
Adri, I have a question for you. I know that you took care of your mom before she passed, and I wanted to know, what was that experience for you? What was it like?
Well, I talked about some aspects of it, right? Well, I think a lot of aspects of it.
Yes.
Even on the Locatora Radio's segment, pero I think in connection to this topic, it was very similar to some extent. Unfortunately, I didn't know that my mom was passing away. I think that's even a misconception that like sometimes when your loved one is ill that they're going to pass away. For many of us, it happened so suddenly. But before she passed, I was the primary, I would say, caretaker during the day. I would say that I took her to about 90% of her appointments. There was the liver doctor, there was her general doctor, there was the ICU visits, and yeah, there was a lot of translation that was necessary. And, honestly, some of the professionals that I dealt with I could tell were burnt out themselves with the way that they would talk to me or respond, or they wouldn't take urgency in some of the complaints, that my mom was experiencing, or even witnessing my mom getting blood drawn every single time. And, sometimes the harshness that they would use on her. And so that became very difficult. And so I myself would identify as a passive, typically speaker, communicator. When I'm upset, passive aggressive sometimes. But in those settings, I was very passive, and so it was quite difficult, but I knew I needed to advocate
You learn something about yourself.
yeah, because she, didn't speak English, and she was just hating her quality of life at that point. And anyway, so yeah, I think it was just very difficult in the moment, but I was definitely on survival mode. And so tired because of all the driving that I'd have to do with her. And my mom wasn't an easy woman either. So it was like emotionally it was complicated too.
So lots of patience.
Yeah, lots of patience. I definitely understood. I was much more patient with her around then. I think, to be honest, and I talked about this before, it was because I wasn't scared of her anymore. Because unfortunately, like the grieving side of things is that I witnessed her physically, just kind of becoming weaker. Yeah, becoming weaker. And so that made me less afraid of her. in a very bittersweet kind of way. That was very sad to witness too. Like,
And that role, because then the roles switch, then now you become the caretaker, and she's more of like we switch, like you're the child. Like I told my mom, like mi niña, se tiene que comer toda esa comida y no se pare de ahí hasta que se la coma. And she's like, well, I see, now you know.
thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you for asking. Just super bittersweet, overall the situation. But yeah, maybe I should do another episode on like recapping where I am. How long has it been since 22? 4 years? 4 years. Yeah. But bueno, with that, we are getting close to the end here. And we want to know also a question that came in is in regards to how caregivers can help their own mental health. And if you have any tips for dealing with resentment and anger as a caregiver.
I would say it's, making space for different emotions at the same time. Because I can say that it can be normal to kind of like feel that resentment. So being able to make space for the emotions and naming the emotions, venting. For example, I love my mom deeply. However, I feel resentment towards the situation.
Absolutely.
Right? So that they can both coexist, and being able to kind of like, yeah, they're there. However, I can separate the two. That it's not resentment towards her, it's resentment towards, the situation or the illness, and the illness itself. So I feel that has helped me kind of like, or have accepted it. But, like with acceptance, you don't necessarily have to agree with it, but you accept it. And then that has also helped me kind of like separate the two.
I think something I'd say to that is in regards to how you process or who you process to rather. And I think it's really important to find community with people who are experiencing similar type of caregiving, like caregiving for somebody that has a medical condition versus somebody that is, I don't know, there's just different types of caregiving situations, right? But try to find people that understand that experience, specifically like the cancer experience versus like, maybe requiring a transplant. I think that there could be so much community and healing within that. I did find myself talking to people that, were my friends, but had never been in a caregiving situation before. And so some of the tips, if you will, were not very helpful. And I found myself feeling a little bit conflicted because it's like, I want to try what you're saying, but it just doesn't fit and suit, the situation. Or even like my mom was a nice again, so it's not like I could just give her a hug and she'd feel better, right? Like, the emotional aspect of things. So yeah, I think finding that level of support for yourself is really important as a caregiver, because if you don't talk to somebody about the things going on, you're going to end up with more resentment, without a doubt. You're going to be angry at the system, at your loved one, at yourself perhaps, and you don't want to lose yourself in all of this, because it's very easy to, while you're prioritizing the health of someone else versus your own.
So support is a big thing.
Yeah. And so thank you so much for being here. We are closing out and going into the Spanish segments of the same topic, but we want to learn more about you. Where can people find you, and anything else you'd like to mention in regards to projects or the topic?
Well, first I want to say thank you for the invitation and meeting me here in Miami. And where can people find me? They can find me on Instagram. My platform is Thriving Counseling Solutions, and my website is www.thrivingcounselingsolutions.com. And I mainly focus on working with the Latin community and Afro Latinas and from the islands, and kind of tackling anxiety, trauma, grief, and and a lot of the things that not only I can relate from the personal perspective, but also, from a clinical training as well.
Okay. Any ages in particular?
I work with teenagers and adults as well.
Okay, awesome. And in Florida only? You're only licensed?
Florida, yes, and I'm licensed in Florida.
Well, thank you so much again. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and stay tuned for this topic en español.
Thank you.